3 days of training camp are in the books, and Friday's dominant defensive performance proved that the path to a starting job on the 2025 Commanders defense is through physical and aggressive play built in the image of head coach Dan Quinn. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I am David Harrison, your host and your guy on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA9.com. And I'm right here with you 5 days a week. You can also find me writing about the Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. And you can follow me on X at DHarrison82. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or view. And a special thank you goes out to all the everydayers who come through for every episode, including a second bonus episode this weekend. We just got so much to talk about. If you haven't already, please make sure you are subscribed for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. I sent out a message on social media, but not everybody follows me on social media or sees social media. We went over 15,000 subscribers here in the last couple of days. So a huge thank you to everybody who's supporting the show. If it's your first time here, welcome to the show. Hopefully you like it. Hopefully you come back again for more. Coming up on today's episode, we're going to look ahead to the next 3 days of training camp practices and at how the players are delivering on Coach Quinn's vision. But first, we got to dissect that vision. All of that's coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing it thanks to our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. This is not just a generic Washington Commanders training camp overview. It's a living showcase of Dan Quinn's core principles where you can draw a straight line, at least that's what we're going to do here on today's episode, from what he's saying to us in his press conferences before practices every day to the competition and the specific skill work that we're seeing on the field. So Dan Quinn's core philosophies, we already know, physical, explosive, all of that stuff. Well, it's all being seen and it's all turning into action in the 3 practices that we've been able to witness so far here in training camp. Iron sharpens iron. It's a cliche. It's something that we've heard said multiple times these first 3 days of training camp, but it's true, right? Good competition begets good competition. Good competition turns players into better players. The team's identity is trying to be competitive. Dan Quinn has talked multiple times about we're our first opponent. The first Washington Commanders opponent of the year is the Washington Commanders. So the better work you can give to each other, the better off you're going to be. Dan Quinn is a big fan of boxing, uses a lot of boxing analogies. I like boxing. I don't know it as much as Dan Quinn does, but I've had to have this conversation with my son. My son boxes, and you know he's a good person. He wants other people to be successful, and I had to kind of explain to him, and his coach had to kind of explain to him, when you get in the ring to spar against someone, you don't do them any favors by taking a little bit off. You don't do them any favors by maybe not being as aggressive and fighting your true fighting style. You do your opponent, you do your partner, rather, your sparring partner favors by coming at them, by testing their skills, testing their defense, really giving them good work. That's what the Washington Commanders are trying to do. That's the mentality that Dan Quinn is pitching and selling, and that is what the Washington Commanders are doing early on here in training camp. Day 1, first snap of 11 on 11s, started off with a bomb, literally a bomb. Jayden Daniels-to-Deebo on the left side of the field, touchdown pass to Deebo Samuel. Now, I happen to just be watching Deebo because Deebo was lined up in the slot. He was going up against Tyler Owens. Tyler Owens is doing a lot of work trying to get acclimated to some of these new positions he's playing. So I was specifically watching those two, just fortunate enough that Deebo was the target and came down to the play. Some other media members were watching Jayden specifically, and the offensive line did say that potentially a sack would have occurred on that play. Regardless, you love the idea that the offense is coming up, very first play of 11 on 11s, dialing up the pressure against the defense, saying, we're going to take shots. We're going to come after you. This is going to be training camp, buddy. Buckle up because it is going to be challenging. And you love that mentality. So regardless of if it would have been a sack, if it would have been a touchdown, even if it was a clean pocket, it would have fallen incomplete. You just love the mentality that Cliff Kingsbury, Jayden Daniels, Coach Quinn are bringing into this thing of we're going to be aggressive from the start. Now, the defense also answered back. We saw some really good coverages from Trey Amos, the rookie cornerback, getting physical in coverage, hand checking, doing what he can physically in a portion of the practices that's not as physical. Dorrance Armstrong Jr. putting moves on guys without pads on, getting into the backfield, getting free, getting after the quarterback. You love seeing some of that stuff. And then, of course, we go fast forward a little bit to day 3 and the defense's dominant end of the week on Friday. Mikey Sainristil picking off Jayden Daniels to start the practices, 11-on-11 sessions. And then you see later on, Jayden makes a perfect throw intended for Chris Moore right between defenders Quan Martin and Marshawn Lattimore. So again, iron sharpening iron. That really great quarterback pass is going to help Quan Martin. It's going to help Marshawn Lattimore. Now, the pass wasn't completed because it came off the hands of Moore, unfortunately. But either way, each side, it might come on different days, might come in different reps, but they're giving each other their best. They're giving each other the good work that they need to get in order to get better. Player-led intensity is a big thing here. Bobby Wagner gets his interception and, had to let Jayden Daniels hear a little bit about it. Another theme that we heard this week from Dan Quinn, the ramp-up period, right? I know that, culture is something that we talk about a lot, maybe a little bit too much, but these first few days of training camp really is about reestablishing that culture, reinforcing that culture, making sure that the new guys truly see and embrace what the culture is here for the Washington Commanders. However, they also started off with red zone work. Dan Quinn talked about this is the most important phase of the game, the most important, the end of game situations or red zone situations. So that's where everything started from. Day 1, we saw our first session of teamwork starting at the 5-yard line at some points. Second team got in there, started at the 14-yard line. Clearly IDing those situations and really trying to hammer home those lessons. Day 3, you also had red zone focus towards the end of the session. And of course, while the defense won, you like the defense having good red zone sessions on the third day. You like the offense having good red zone sessions on the first day. Again, just getting better at those important areas. And then, of course, skill development, right? Developing the players is what the coaches are here for. Dan Quinn talked about how the coaches developed themselves and each other during the offseason so that when the players got here, they were ready to fully develop those guys. And we've seen some of those efforts bearing fruit already. Running back Croskey-Merritt, late round draft pick, comes in, had really nice movement through the hole, really showing some veteran savvy, good eyes, really great eyes. And running backs coach and run game coordinator Anthony Lynn, obviously going to get a little bit of credit for that. Training camp is the period of time that these position coaches really have the most opportunity to hone in on skill development. During the season, it's mostly just about preparing opponents, preparing game plans, all these things. This is the biggest time these guys have to be teachers, essentially, is the way that Coach Quinn put it earlier in the offseason. And then Coach Quinn also noticing Croskey-Merritt. So the nice shift in the hole, no loss of acceleration out of the cut. Those are things that I observed here on the program earlier in the week. But Dan Quinn also observing some very similar things, said, quote, the violence of the cuts, that he can get in his shoulders square and get downhill fast, end quote, is something that he really noticed and said that Croskey-Merritt off to a really good start. So you always love, as an observer, whether you're a fan or you're a media member, when you observe something and say, here's what I saw, and then you hear the head coach say, here's what I saw, and they jive. You love that. You love those moments. Gives you a little bit of confidence in what you're looking at, right? Running back Chris Rodriguez Jr., great contact balance, specifically on a couple of reps, stumbling, tripping, guys at his feet, but able to stay on his feet. I told you guys earlier this offseason, Chris really put a lot of work in on his body, shed about 10 pounds, but kept a lot of muscle. And I think that if he was his bigger version of himself that we saw the last few years or last couple of years, Chris Rodriguez probably isn't able to keep his balance the way that he did on some of these reps. So it just kind of shows, again, going after it. The coaches are guiding him, saying, here's what we need out of you, and you love having that. So that's a little bit on Coach Quinn's philosophy with a little bit of example from the practices of how that philosophy is being enacted. However, the philosophy can only be as strong as the veterans that are also carrying that philosophy forward. And what we're hearing and seeing out of Ashburn is that the team's veterans aren't just buying in, they're actively building their own skills around that philosophy. That and more coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Game Time. You're hearing all about the battles happening right here at Commanders Camp, the iron sharpens iron competition, big plays from the offense and a defense that is really starting to fly around. You get that feeling, you just want to be in the stands to see it for yourself. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets to preseason games this year without the stress. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple, and the prices on Game Time, the Game Time app, actually drop the closer it gets to kickoff. So if you decide on game day that you want to go, you can still get incredible deals. Plus, they have seat views right in the app before you buy, so you can pick the perfect spot to watch those battles in the trenches that we were just talking about, so you know exactly what your view will be for that game-changing play or to see that roster-making player that you want to see so much. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The most impressive thing happening right now in Ashburn isn't just Dan Quinn delivering his coaching philosophy and us being able to tie some observations from practice to those philosophies. It's the immediate buy-in from key veterans who are clearly putting their own stamp on this new competitive identity that some of them are joining for the first time. Certainly, we have guys that are returning, but you have some new veterans in the building that are really, really seeing the fruits of everything that Dan Quinn is preaching and what these guys have been talking about, their teammates as they come into the building, what they've been preaching as well. The players have to live this culture, right? So culture and environment, something that Dan Quinn talked about this week, two different things that oftentimes get confused. The environment being where you come to work and the amenities, the atmosphere, all that stuff. The culture, as Dan Quinn puts it, how we get down. That is really what we're trying to get to the heart of, is what Commanders football looks like from a coach standpoint, expectation standpoint, execution standpoint from the players, right? Their words and the actions that show the total buy-in, and embracing competition is number one. Offensive lineman Brandon Coleman, not the oldest veteran in the room, right? Second-year player. So, and some people wouldn't, like, there's a different classification. You got rookie, young guy, then veteran, if that's how you want to do it. The technical definition of veteran, like Brandon Coleman would still be a veteran because he's got a year under his belt, so he's a 1 year, veteran, whatever. Splitting hairs a little bit, but the point is Brandon Coleman, one of the Commanders, embracing that competitive spirit, right? We've heard Dan Quinn and Adam Peters talk about this. I know some people are surprised every time they hear them say this, that you're going to come here, you're going to compete. You're not getting handed anything. Everything is going to be earned, and that's not for everybody. And people get surprised when they find out that not every NFL player actually wants to come out here and earn his keep. You know what I mean? Like, some NFL players, they just want to be handed stuff. They just want to say, well, I've already earned it and I don't need to earn it anymore. And, those players, this might not be the perfect place for them. Anyway, Brandon Coleman, not one of those guys, absolutely out here trying to earn every single thing that he gets. And he's told us in his press conference earlier this week that battling guys like Javon Kinlaw and Daron Payne is really helping him prepare for his season and for his new role as an interior offensive lineman on the offensive line. He even said he asked Javon Kinlaw for advice after a particularly tough rep. And I'll tell you, every conversation I have with Brandon Coleman, on the record or off the record, this is something that I really, really enjoy about him. And I also got to tell you guys, like, from covering, multiple training camps, years of watching this, like, the coordination and the handshake that's going on between these guys, like, it's really not as common as you might think it is for O linemen to go to D linemen and say, hey, what'd you see on that rep? Or, hey, if I set like this, what are you going to try to do? Like, it's really a little bit actually weird. I've actually had conversations with players before where I've been like, hey, I saw this on your tape, for example. How much of this did you get advice from, like, this guy, for example? I'm trying to be intentionally vague here, just not to out people, but, and like, sometimes the player's like, oh, I've never really asked that person about that. That's a really good idea. I should do that. And, look, to me, I'm kind of like, yeah, man, like, you should probably do that. But at the same time, I've also had 20 years of strategic experience, right? It's not football that I did for a living, right? But learning how to strategize, learning how to develop skills and all that stuff, it translates to different fields, right? So some of these guys are younger players. So to see a guy like Brandon Coleman in his second year being that proactive player, saying, hey, let me talk to this vet, like, bro, you just kicked my butt on this rep. What is it that let you take advantage of me? What is it you saw in my game, in my technique, that you knew you could fixate on, and all these things? It's not as common. I'm not saying it's like super rare, but it's not as common as you would think it was, I think, from the outside looking in. Daron Payne talking about how he can help other people get better. Said, quote, I'm just competing, trying to make our own line better and just let them make me better, end quote. That is exactly the mentality that you're talking about. Veteran and peer leadership. Von Miller, 15th year in the National Football League, came in and said that he sees it as his duty to, quote unquote, pay all the information that I've learned forward to the young guys, especially, unquote. And again, you have a guy who's coming in, and, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn made sure to make it clear, like, Von's not just coming here to be another leader in the locker room, another coach on the field. He's coming in here to play. And I'll tell you, from watching him on the field, that dude is quick. And that dude, I mean, not just a get off. I mean, he put a spin move on a tackle that was just nasty. I mean, the highlight is Mikey Sainristil getting an interception. Right? I was on that play. But the spin move that he put on an offensive tackle, nasty. Anyway, so you love that. Brandon Coleman, again, talking about people in the rookie class coming to him with questions and him already trying to pass down the information that he has. It's all about helping out the brotherhood, right? That's the word that we heard a lot last year, the brotherhood. All right, so that's another way that they're emulating what Dan Quinn's putting out there. Team first and the earn it focus. Again, these guys have talked about not every player wants to come out here and earn everything they have. Zach Ertz quoted as saying, quote, talent really doesn't win you games in this league. Everything is earned each and every day, end quote. And Zach Ertz is one of those people that we've told you guys this before. When he's not on the field actively practicing, maybe they're doing special teams that he doesn't have a role on or whatever it is they're doing. He's on the side. He's on the side with tight ends coach David Rye, or he's on the field by himself. He's doing sprints. He's doing routes. He's catching balls. Like Zach Ertz is always out there. One of the hardest guys working on the field, going out there trying to earn every single thing that he gets. Von Miller, again, a newcomer who's just learning what it is that this Washington Commanders team is doing, says, quote, this team is all about winning. I'm all about winning. Whatever it takes to win, I'm going to do, end quote. I love the quote from Von Miller earlier this week where he says, I can roll out of bed, throw on my house shoes and rush the passer, because you see it on the field and you're like, yeah, like he probably could, like bathrobe and everything, could probably just get it done. The fourth thing that we're going to notice, universal praise for Dan Quinn. Again, you don't get that buy-in if that message is coming from somebody that people don't respect. Zach Ertz, again, said he loves how Dan Quinn, quote-unquote, over-communicates, which prevents locker room issues. It prevents confusion. It prevents people from reading into things or making assumptions when you have a coach that's willing to send the message and make sure the message is truly sent the way that it needs to. Bobby Wagner, talking about head coach Dan Quinn, said, quote, he wants you to be the best version of yourself, end quote, which is what makes players want to play for him, want to play so hard for him. It's not just about me doing my job and me being a good coach and me having job security and all this other stuff. It's about you and understanding that Dan Quinn is in the people business. And when his people are motivated, his people are taken care of, those people will make sure that you're fine as well. Von Miller, again, quote unquote, all the rumors about him are true. He's a great coach. He's a great man. I mean, again, just the buy-in coming, not just from the message, but from the person that is delivering the message. A lot of people can stand up and say a lot of rah-rah things, say a lot of good things, a lot of words that sound really good. But if you don't believe the authenticity of the person behind the language, you're never going to really buy into it, right? Key highlights from the first 3 days of training camp practice. We have Mikey Sainristil's pick six on Friday that really kind of sparked the defensive dominance we saw on the third day of practice. Again, it was the same rep that Von Miller got really good pressure in the pocket quickly with that nasty spin move that he put on. Deebo Samuel's touchdown on the first day of practice, the first 11-on-11 play call, deep shot from Jayden Daniels on the left side of the field. That was a great play. And then Bobby Wagner's INT. It came in 7-on-7s, right? So we don't harp too much on 7-on-7s. But again, to see Bobby Wagner just roam in the middle, understanding what's happening, what the offense is trying to do against him, stepping in, making a play. You absolutely love to see it. The player buy-in and the highlight plays and shells are encouraging, but Monday marks the beginning of true evaluation. It separates the nice camp stories from the players that are actually going to define this team in the fall. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season full of breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions that you can handle. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, I'm playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. We talk all day about the iron sharpens iron competition out here at camp, and our fantasy league can be just as intense. The smack talk just hits different in the Yahoo Messenger boards. It's our version of Bobby Wagner letting a quarterback hear about an interception. It's a perfect place to build your own winning culture with an easy setup and a great mobile app. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over the course of 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It's all beginning on August 4th. So stay tuned and get started by creating or joining your own Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy football season the best one yet. We've seen the scheme and the skill in shorts and shells for about a week. But starting on Monday, We're going to find out who can win their one-on-one battles when the pads come on and the real evaluations begin. We're going to end this episode looking forward to the next 3 days. We got first 3 days, day off on Saturday, then we come back Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. The next 3 days, Sunday still in shells, but Monday is the padded day, and then Tuesday is the day after the pads. Really great way to round out the next 3 days before a day off again on Wednesday, at least for the media. The real evaluations, again, begin on that day. What are we looking for just throughout, right? And look, we're still going to be out there Sunday, obviously, watching for all this stuff. But let's be real. Pad day is what everybody's really wanting to talk about, right? So Monday afternoon's episode is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do a lot of good things. And one of the focuses, we already talked about him a little bit here on this episode, Brandon Coleman, right? Moving from tackle to guard. The first day the pads are on, Brandon Coleman told us earlier this week, quote, when I can actually work on those things like pad level and anchoring quick in the pass game, end quote. And it really is. It's going to be the moment where we see, like, can Brandon Coleman do this for real? And look, it's 1 day of practice. So even if he struggles a little bit, even if he gets beat here and there, it's not going to be like doom and gloom and, oh, like Brandon Coleman's a bust. Brandon Coleman's just never going to work out. No, it's only 1 day of practice, but it's a very exciting 1 day of practice and a very good opportunity for Brandon to showcase his skills, but also for that defensive line to get a little bit. Like, defensive linemen, like, they're looking forward to this day a lot. The test against that defensive line, Deron Payne, Javon Kinlaw, Johnny Newton, et cetera, bringing the thump every day is what these players like to say. The key question here is going to be how Brandon Coleman handles that power and handles the assignments, the stunts, the twists, all that stuff in full contact drills. Of course, you always love O-line versus D-line one-on-ones. That is exactly where I will be when that happens. I will be over there in the one-on-ones. Second thing we're looking for, Jayden Daniels versus a more physical presence. Now, look, they still can't hit him, still can't touch him, still can't do all that stuff, right? But you have the physicality added to the mix this week. You also have the pressure a little bit. 3 interception day. Everybody knows, and yes, one of those interceptions would have been called back because of the penalty. But everybody knows, like, we're all talking about it. The fans know, you know, I know, we all know, he knows that he threw 3 interceptions in that last practice. Now, be a little bit more of a realistic. So we'll see how he bounces back Sunday first and foremost, right? But on Monday, a little bit more of a realistic scenario, right? DBs can be a little bit more physical. You have a little bit of a real pocket. Hearing those pads just smash against each other, hearing those guys grunting and you know, straining themselves, trying to block and trying to make pass rushes and moves and all this stuff, it's going to give a little bit more authenticity to a quarterback, even though he knows he still can't be hit. So is he going to force some throws in tight windows? Is he going to, you know, how's he going to react to the pocket collapsing, all that stuff? Is it going to alter his timing? I don't expect it will, because so far Jayden has been nothing but consistent and poised, but it is still something that you have to watch for, of course. And then finally, unleashing the physicality of these skill players, man. Deebo Samuel is one that you're going to be looking for. Zach Ertz said earlier at the end of this last session of practices, quote, I know he's going to take it to another level when we get the ball in his hands, end quote, with pads on. Watching out for how he's using some of these situations, breaking tackles, getting away from guys. And look, they're still not going to go like 100%, right? You're talking like 70, 80%, stuff like that. But that first day of practice is always one of the more physical days. And then, of course, running backs, right? So Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, obviously up there. But I know a lot of you are looking for Chris Rodriguez Jr. How's that smaller, more compact body going to play with pads behind it? And then Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt. We've seen a lot from him. And remember, I told you guys in the conversation I had with Tyler Owens after Friday's practice, you know, he said, like, some of these running backs kind of been feeling themselves a little bit. Once the pads are on, we can actually get in the gap. We can actually put a hit on them and do all those things. We'll kind of see how it really goes. So we're looking for that power. We're looking for that contact balance against live tackling. It's going to be a lot of fun to see. I know the players are looking forward to it. I know you're looking for it. And I know I am looking forward. It's like Christmas in the NFL every year. The first day of pads is that exact thing. And then joint practices is like another day of Christmas. So the story this first week in Ashburn is all about Dan Quinn setting the standard, the players setting the standard, and everybody rising up to meet it. The story of next week is going to be who can not just survive, but thrive as the intensity ramps up. So we'll be here with you for all of that. And then we'll be here with you to recap all of it as well, just like we are here today. That's going to do it for today's episode. The next time on Locked On Commanders, we're back out at camp. You fans, Commanders fans, are back at camp for the first time this year. It's going to be super exciting. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, you can text them directly to me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders. Locked On NFL Top 100 has dropped on Locked On Sports today. You can find out what everybody thinks of your Washington Commanders stars by going there, checking it out on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. To the everydayers, I see you every day. I appreciate you every day. And today, I'm going to give you a special thank you here at the end of the episode, just like I did at the start of it. Until next time, everybody out there, stay safe, be kind to one another. We're going to talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.